All right, welcome back to Highways and Hazmat, podcast where we dive into the world of rules, risks, and realities of commercial vehicle and hazmat transportation. I'm Brent Moore. Alongside me is my co-host and friend Clay Greene. So, like we said before, each week we're going to dive into the world of hazardous materials, trucking, and transportation, throwing some real world stories and kind of a little insight on there from our backgrounds, and hopefully maybe keep everybody safe, informed, and maybe even a little entertained out there on the road.
Entertainment's always good.
Oh, entertainment's great, man. So, how's things going in your world, Clay?
I have no complaints. Things are remarkably well.
Yeah, just I know right now there's a lot of new stuff going on. Federal government shutdown and all this stuff, and you were telling me a little story before we came on about trying to get some paperwork and going through some retirements through the feds, and it was. I got to say the paper trail, the story, the bureaucracy, and the red tape has got to be the most federal thing I have ever heard.
It's pretty federaled up. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the new way. We'll just start calling things all federaled up now.
It's all federaled up. We're at the point now where there's thousands of questions and no answers, and nobody's answering the phones these days to give you an answer. So hopefully it'll all work out soon. I will say that after many years, I will no longer miss the looming shutdowns and all of the insanity and wasted time that goes into preparing for something that seems to happen every year.
Yeah, the bad thing about it is I'm actually sitting now. I did some training with a hazmat carrier back in July, and we had some questions coming up on some I'm not gonna say really contradictions, but it was the way the hazmat regulations are written. Things not
they're not written clear.
Well, the whole thing was what was it I heard in class one day was it's written for lawyers by lawyers, so only lawyers can understand it.
And like I always say, that's why we have 8,000 letters of interpretation.
Well, exactly, because we got to fit in what you can fit in.
Exactly.
Yeah, so speaking of letters of interpretation, so we had a question come up about a proper shipping name, and the only reference was two previous interpretation letters that kind of semi-contradicted each other. A regulation that didn't really apply unless you went to the maritime hazmat regulations to look up a definition, which by the letter of interpretation, FMCSA had pulled in to apply to highway transportation, even though it's not defined in there. So
right, exactly. And how do they get Part 176 included into Part 177 and then bring it back to Part 173?
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting to hear on. And so I actually sent a request to FMCSA for an interpretation on that, and then of course government shuts down, and we are where we are. So stand by to stand by.
Brent, my years of experience tell me you're going to be waiting a little while.
Well, having spent nearly 20 years in government service, I'm used to the phrase of hurry up and wait and stand by to stand by.
I call that the speed of government.
Yeah, it's definitely not ludicrous speed, that's for sure.
No, and it's nowhere near plaid either.
No, plaid would be a great improvement for that.
Great improvements, though. The references to Spaceballs. I know you got to be happy Spaceballs 2 is under development now.
Man, I cannot wait on that, and
it's gonna be epic.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, especially with Mel Brooks coming back at it, and pretty much the entire original cast. Other than John Candy, I'm definitely going to miss Barf.
Yeah, well, his son is actually going to step into the role there.
Yeah, so
that they're going to segue into that. But yeah, Mel Brooks, 98 years old and still out there making movies.
Man, he is awesome. Man. And man, I was a little leery about it when the advertisement came out for Spaceballs 2. And for those that don't know, we and Clay are both diehard Mel Brooks fans, and
absolutely.
And between Mel Brooks and Leslie Nielsen, that's kind of where life runs at right there.
But the Zucker brothers knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I saw that advertisement for Spaceballs. I was like, oh man, they're coming out with a 2. Is this going to be like one of those redos where they're messing everything up? And then I saw they're bringing back pretty much the entire original cast, and I was like, man, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I think the one that jumped the shark for me was when they remade True Grit. You know, I, I never watched the remake from 2010. You just, in my opinion, you cannot improve on the original there. But a lot of people are telling me I'm wrong. But I'll let them tell me I'm wrong, and I'll keep watching old John Wayne as Rooster Cogburn. Not one of Lloyd Bridges' kids.
Well, I did break down the other day and watch the new Naked Gun. So
Oh, okay. I still have not watched this yet.
yeah, so I will not gonna spoil it for you, not gonna spoil it for anybody else, but it's worth a watch. I think they did they paid homage to the original pretty good.
Ah, that's awesome. Well, let's talk about some serious stuff. I guess I don't know. Maybe our forte. We don't need to talk about hazmat and highways. Maybe we just need to talk about Gen X type movies and stuff like that. Even though
Well,
you're a millennial.
no, negative on the millennial man. I'm a yeah, not 1981 man. I'm claiming the tail end of Gen X on that,
I hear you.
or what do they call it now, Xennial or something like that.
Yeah, they got so many new names. I can't keep up. It's generational strife is what I call it.
Well, I'll say this: it's 2025. I identify as Gen X.
We had the best music. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So yes, I guess kind of getting back on topic. I guess it's from updates on regulations and what's going on. There really ain't a whole lot going on since the government's kind of
Yeah.
grind to a halt right now. So a little bit of news though, we did get a new administrator for the FMCSA finally.
They did, absolutely. I don't think that there could have ever been a better fitted person to assume that role. I mean, all aspects, phenomenal pick by the administration, and very, very, very excited to see where things are going to go forward.
Yeah, I saw. As soon as I saw the news come out that they had or Trump had nominated, Chief Derek Barrs, formerly the Florida Highway Patrol. I actually sent Derek a text because I've
Yeah,
known Derek and worked with Derek for quite a few years. A lot of our Operation Safe Drive stuff we did between Georgia and Florida. Concentrating on 95 and
yeah.
spin over to 75. I've worked with him quite a bit. Sent him one, told him congratulations, and I 100% agree with you. I think that they probably couldn't have made a better pick for that.
No, it's phenomenal. I mean, the enforcement background, the industry background, the understanding and the working and partnering with industry. I don't think there's ever been a nominee for that post that has the complete covering of the bases of everything needed for understanding in that role.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point on that one. Talking about the partnering with the industry. That was one thing. You and I both have instructing backgrounds.
Yeah,
Both teaching for the FMCSA's National Training Center. Around the country and stuff. This is one thing I always tried to stress to new guys coming in, whether it be going to a company and doing outreach, or if you stop a driver for a roadside inspection, or even if you're in for compliance investigation, is it's a normal course of business. I mean, hey, in the law enforcement world, you sometimes you do stop people that are maybe DUI or something like that. So you handle your enforcement business with it, but by and large, I mean, when you're dealing with the industry, it's got to be a partnership.
absolutely.
The enforcement's got to be there to make sure that that the job is getting done correctly, because as we've seen here lately, and we'll talk about some CDL stuff here in a little bit, but as we've seen here lately, um crash in Florida, now look, crash in California, multiple fatalities, things like that. I mean, without having enforcement out there, I mean, you got an 80,000 pound truck rolling down the road. You mix a little hazmat in there. I mean, you got some serious issues, so you got to have that. But at the same time, what I used to tell my guys and guys in class, there's so much that changes on the industry side on a regular basis, whether it's new equipment coming out, new types of trucks rolling out, things like that. There's no way on the enforcement side we can keep up with everything that happens. So, I always stress that, hey, the driver is your absolute best source of information,
Mhm.
because they know their truck, they know what they do day in, day out. If you see something on a truck that just doesn't look right and you've never seen it before, ask the driver. That's,
Yeah,
make it a partnership.
Exactly, and I mean the one thing that really wasn't touched on in everything you said was the technology. The technology is changing faster than anyone can keep up. You know, in the last several years, we've seen so many different emerging technologies that have been deployed by industry, and you're you're learning something new every time something new comes out on the market.
Yeah, and yeah, like I say, I mean, and it's like I told guys in the industry, our job from the enforcement side is, we have to know the entire span of regulations out there because I mean, you may go from, um, you stop a shipment, you stop a log truck going down the road, you do an inspection on it, you know, next thing you got hazmat nerds like us go out there and stop a shipment going down the road of uranium hexafluoride. Then now you're inspecting the radioactive shipment down there, and you've got to know the whole gamut of regulations and what's going to apply on there. So there's, like you say, technology, vehicle equipment, things like this stuff changes so much, man, and it changes so fast. It's got to be a partnership, and I think that's where, like you mentioned, Derek's background coming from enforcement, but then once he retired, working in the industry, being involved with CVSA, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, as the kind of over the industry side of that for a term. Man, I don't think they could have made a better pick.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to call him a friend for, oh wow, 30, 35 years or so. You know, we grew up right across state line from each other, known each other a long time. But yeah, super pick. He'll do great things.
Yeah, and speaking of the industry side, kind of, as you and I were kind of bouncing around some things and some topics going on, you brought up a good one that I've seen a little bit as I've retired from the enforcement side, started working in the private side, as a consultant and things like this, is the amount of I'll call it what it is. I mean, hey, I'm a retired special operations lieutenant from a state law enforcement agency. I just call it like it is, man. These predatory consulting companies.
Yeah,
And when I say predatory, I mean it's like you know, it's if you go online to apply for US DOT number, that
yep,
DOT number is free. The
yep,
FMCSA does not charge for that. It takes, and I mean, it does take navigating the system to get through there, answering the questions right, and doing stuff like this. But it's not rocket science. And when you see these companies out here that, hey, I will get your DOT number for you, and but by the way, my fee is $2,000.
yeah.
It's like what? I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, I knew prior to leaving FMCSA there was a lot of fraud out there in just all kind of areas because you saw this for years with OSHA compliance where these aggressive marketers or predatory marketers, whatever you want to call them, would send out these notices. Oh, you need to buy all this stuff. You need to buy this, or you're going to have to pay this astronomical fine. And you started seeing these things really take place. And I mean, what happens is you do a legitimate Google search to update your DOT registration. Well, some of these, less than scrupulous people have paid Google all this money to become a, you know, number one pick on Google rather than FMCSA's, system to update it. Recently, had a friend of mine who owns, a couple of small vehicles, was an intrastate carrier, had some issues. He called and asked me, and he said, I don't know what to do. I paid all this money to all these people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he essentially told me he had done just that, went online trying to update his DOT number and wound up having some company that he had to pay $750 to update his DOT number. And then they changed him from an intrastate carrier to an interstate carrier, which put him in the new insurance program. And then the aggressive marketer calls and emails really began to go out. And um, the um, um, I'm having a brain fart. What's the we're gonna have to edit that out. What's the registration? UCR.
Yeah, UCR. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So cut that out to here. The UCR fee was $43 for his company, but yet this unscrupulous vendor charged him $700 to do his UCR.
Wow.
Again, because he did not know. That alone itself, and I mean, I myself, when I set up my LLC, before my LLC was even approved by the state of Georgia, I got one of the aggressive letters in the mail telling me that I had to buy all these OSHA posters to put in my place of business, or I was going to have to pay a $25,000 fine. And I'm like, I'm a one man shop. It's just me. OSHA doesn't apply. I know that, but how many people get that letter don't know that?
Yeah, and that's the thing is I started after I retired um there's some trucking associations and stuff. So people got pointed to me. It's like, hey, I need to get a DOT number. How do I get
Yeah.
set up and things like this? And I was like, yeah, I'll work with you on there. I mean, with my background doing new insurance safety audits and stuff and compliance investigations, like, yeah, I'll help you get your DOT number, get all the files set up that you need, so that when you have your safety audit done, you've got what you need. And here's what it's going to cost. Which I tell people, when you look at consultants, yeah, a couple things you want to look at on there. And again, this is Brent's opinion, but this is Brent's opinion for being around this business for a while now. But if somebody charges $25 an hour to set your company up for you, I would have questions about their credentials and their background.
Mm.
And if somebody's coming in here charging you $2,000 to help you get a DOT number get set up, I'd have questions about their integrity. So I mean, when you look at, I mean, I tell everybody, they call me and say, hey, I want to get set up. How much you charge for this? How much you charge for that? I'm like, well, I don't really have a per se set fee. I kind of like, you tell me what you need. I kind of figure out what, how long it's going to take me, what it's going to, what it's going to cost me, because, normally if I'm setting somebody up, I just, I kind of do the pass through charge for the fees and stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll work something out on it. And, for setting a company up, it's like, hey, I'll help you get your DOT number, UCR, and I'll, for this price, I'll stay with you through your safety audit.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get your safety audit done, then hey, you're in business, just keep rocking on along. And it just it just amazes me what you see out there. And the problem I see is it's a lack of knowledge on the consultant side, if you want to call that, and then there's lack of knowledge on the carrier side.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them are equally tough spots, I would say. Because if you hire the consultant for $15, $25 an hour, somewhere in that neighborhood, what is their background? I mean, if you
Were they flipping burgers at McDonald's last week, or?
yeah, and I've run across several. I know you've probably seen it too. That you go into a company doing a compliance investigation, their consultant meets you there, and you ask them, "Okay, well, what's your background on this?"
Yeah.
Well, I was an office assistant at the trucking company for a few years, and then I decided I would do this. Well, and hey, there may be somebody out there that did that, and they are sharp as a tack when it comes to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They took to it like I really don't like analogies, but they took to it like a duck in water. They just got it and ran with it, and they know it. But I've seen the same ones as you start, and I've even seen it with guys that work with us that spent their entire career doing roadside inspections,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
then they leave, and then the next day, hey, hey, I'm a consultant now. I can help you get all your files and records straight. And it's like, okay, well, do you know anything about Part 382 alcohol and drug testing? What a what a MRO is, where's qualifications for MRO, this kind of stuff. And they're like, what's an MRO? Well, if you're able to come
Yeah.
and set a drug and alcohol program up, something you might want to know.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've seen it going way back. I can still remember when I first started doing compliance investigations in the late '90s, and uh, the elderly gentleman. This gentleman was probably 75 years old. Had his own company and had to go see him, and the it was obvious he had been driving a truck. He in fact drove trucks during World War II, and the invasion of Europe. And when he came back, he just started driving a truck, and he never stopped. And he had a consultant he hired and paid a lot of money back, in the 90s. He paid him a couple of $1,000s, and to set his files up. And all the guy did was just bring him a bunch of folders with forms and did nothing to fill them out. And, there was nothing there, but he paid all this guy all this money. And then, when we called the guy during everything, because I was trying to help him, he's like, oh, well, I set them up. They're there. He just didn't fill them out. I'm like, did you try to help him? And, the man was not, the most educated, and did everything we could to try and help him. But still, he was in a pickle because he put his faith in this person and, sold him a bill of goods and just give him some paperwork. But you still see stuff like that today. It's unfortunate that it's there, but it's no different than paying Google to get a higher ranking or whatever.
Yeah, I had one company that called me. It's been a couple years ago now, and they'd had a compliance investigation. They got a proposed conditional rating, pretty steep fine on there, and they're like, "Hey, can you come here and help us get this squared away?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, what's it going to cost?" So I looked at the workload on there and I gave them a price on it. And they said, "Okay, we'll call you back." And so they called me back and they said, "Hey, we kind of narrowed it down between you and another company on there. So, why should we hire you?" And I said, "Well, here's my background. The investigators and actually, sure enough, the investigator that came in there to do the compliance investigation on them was actually a former officer that used to work for me." So I'm like,
Right.
"Well, I supervised the guy that did your compliance investigation and helped train him. So, that's one reason on there." And so they come back a little while later and they asked me a question. I will never forget this. They said, "Well, we're talking to this other company, and they're giving us a 100% money back guarantee that they will get us a satisfactory rating. Can you offer the same?" I said, "Well, I'll put it to you like this. When we're done, I'm going to give you everything you need to get a satisfactory rating. Whether or not you put the work in, that's up to you."
Yeah.
That's about as honest as I could be on there.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that as a company, if you're looking to hire a consultant, man, you really got to look into that stuff. What's their background? How long have they been doing
Exactly.
this? And not only say, "Oh, well, hey, they retired from such and such state law enforcement agency, there was the ran the commercial vehicle program." Is like, well, what did they do there? Did they sit in a weigh station and weigh trucks all day long? Were they a roadside inspection officer, or were they actually an investigator that went in and did the compliance investigation? Because it makes a huge difference.
It does. It's all in the vetting process, and that a lot of the times, they're going to go with the cheapest option, but sometimes the cheapest option will come back and bite you.
Yeah. So yeah, and that kind of gets into something I wanted to bring up, because it's misinformation out there, but it's kind of a hot button topic in the news right now is commercial driver's license. Man, 'cause I mean,
Yeah.
how many high profile crashes have we seen here lately? And not to call it out, but I mean, most of them are coming out of the state of California with questions about the validity of their CDLs and whether or not they met the qualifications on it.
Yeah, there's definitely been a huge spike in the trend of what you're seeing there, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I was sitting there and I was thinking about CDLs, and I was thinking like, there's part of it you can get from a regulatory standpoint of what's in Title 49 with what you and I would deal with in Part 383. But then you get into the whole thing. Well, are they, their immigration status and stuff like that, which kind of goes into a whole another level. So, I didn't really want to get into that part, because that's kind of outside the purview of, well, I'll say kind of outside the scope of my expertise. I was not an immigration enforcement officer. So, but, looking at CDLs and stuff is, Man, how many? I guess not only official interpretations have you seen covering CDLs, but how many unofficial interpretations have you seen covering CDLs?
I've actually seen a lot. I mean, if you're familiar with like the interrogators that are used in the ag industry, that the large three-wheeled floater tire, um, you know, spreaders. We had many questions come up 20 years ago about whether or not CDLs were required. Some states were saying they were, some states were saying they weren't, and we had an interpretation issued within FMCSA that said yes, in fact they were, and then of course when that started getting implemented in some states, then other states were pushing back, and then you come up with the whole question what the interpretation is. Okay, where does this stand? So yeah, there's so many things that are out there like that.
Yeah, one of the things I find is I can't remember what was it in the late 2000s or early 2010s. The definition of commercial vehicle in 383.5 got changed from
It was
based solely on 2011. Okay, I knew it was somewhere in
2011.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the exact date. Your photographic memory can remember regulations back to 1949. I can't. So,
Yeah, well,
but
it was that was pretty much the big huge change. It changed the definitions in there in Part 33. That was also when we had the change in the definition of what a tank vehicle was, and
right.
that brought us the whole issue with the IBCs and multiple IBCs, needing a tank endorsement. So but yes, that was 2011 was when the shift started.
Yeah, because before that it was based solely on what your gross vehicle weight rating was,
Mm-hmm.
and so from a roadside inspection standpoint, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, you look on the what we call the B pillar of the door, where the driver's door closes out. You look at the VIN tag on there, you get the gross vehicle weight rating of that, and then you get the gross vehicle weight rating of the trailer if it's carrying a trailer, and
Mm-hmm.
you just add them together and decide, okay, do they need a CDL or not need a CDL. And so and then when they made that change, they threw in there also gross combination weight rating,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of threw a wrench into everybody because it's like, well, where the heck do you find the GCWR at on this? And because not all vehicles have a printed
Right.
GCWR on there. So that kind of threw a wrench in the thing. But then they officially added, gross vehicle weight or gross combination weight, which, okay, well, again, that's pretty simple. Is you put it on a set of scales and see how much it weighs.
Mm-hmm.
Which that brought a lot of people in because just say if you had a box truck with a gross vehicle weight rating right at 26,000 pounds, and you decide that you're gonna load this thing up with whatever. You put it on a set of scales and it weighed 28,000 pounds. Well, the Interp had always been, that's a Class B vehicle because it's weighs more than
Mm-hmm.
that. So they made that official change in there, so that kind of helped out as far as codifying everything. But then we kind of ran into I don't know if I want to call it a problem or not, but I actually had a lively discussion with actually a good friend of mine. Who was a trooper in a neighboring state, because I was looking at a roadside inspection that they had done, and the trailer did not have a GVWR on it.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have a set of scales, so they're able to get the GVWR off the truck. And it was a hot shot. So they're able to get the GVWR off the truck.
A hot shot with no GVWR on the trailer. I'm shocked.
Yes,
Who would have
that's
ever thunk it?
yes, that's one of those things. Like, surely you can't be serious, And but I said so. I said, so I needed to know because from an enforcement action and a compliance investigation, you got to be able to document this stuff to go to court on. And I said, well, how'd you come up with the? I was like, how do y'all come up with this? He's like, well, if we don't have a GVWR on there, then we weigh it. But if we don't weigh it, we go by the rating on the tires.
The
I was like,
tire
what?
weight?
I was like, what?
Oh,
He's like, yeah, we go
okay.
by the rating on the tires. I was like, what? You know,
Is that found is that found in 390 point MSU?
yeah. Well, you know, that brings up, there was two acronyms I always used when I was instructing, and actually I still use these acronyms
Yeah,
today. Going to, when I'm doing industry classes, is number one is RTFB,
that's right.
and
Absolutely.
the second one is DMSU. Well,
Hmm.
for those that don't know, RTFB means read the federal book.
Hmm.
DMSU, don't make stuff up.
Well, and I won't name the state, but I had the occasion to instruct a class in a state where I'll just say their uniforms were very, very sharp. They looked like they were getting ready to invade Poland. And their acronym, that they basically explained things to me was when in doubt, pin it out. That way they got overtime to go to court and stuff.
Wow.
But you see things, but no, you hear all these different stories. You talk about the tires, adding the tires up. I've heard the tags on the axles. What is the axle tag? Oh, it's a 9,000 GVWR axle. Oh, he's got three of those. That was more common when I've heard than the tires. But no, that's part of the importance. And if you go back and read the rulemaking from 2011, there's some of the connotations are there as part of the rulemaking is why they added in that or the gross weight, whichever is greater, into the actual definition. And that's when things change because we all know, not to pick on the hotshot community, but we all know if they have a dually pickup truck that's 14,000 GVWR, and they order a trailer, and the trailer comes with a 14,000 GVWR, and it's a Kaufman trailer. They call Kaufman in North Carolina and say, "Hey, I'd really like a GVWR plate that says it's 12,000 GVWR." Well, guess what? They'll make them a plate, and they'll even put their name on it and send it to them, and they'll re-rate it. And there's literally nothing in the NHTSA regulations because that's all NHTSA. It's not anything to do with FMCSA, and they can do that. So
Well,
it's not
well,
it's not an issue. But
yeah. 'Cause, I mean, the thing about it is, if you look up the definition of gross vehicle weight rating, it's whatever the
right,
manufacturer states that the vehicle is capable of hauling. So
correct,
like you say, if you go to Kaufman and say, I want it downgraded, and they say, well, you know what? Yeah, we agree that thing can haul 12,000 pounds, and that's
right.
it. Uh, okay, well, if the manufacturer says it, that's what you got to go by.
Yeah, and again, I mean that's why that became important. I mean, because we all you developed your spidey senses to it, and you know when you're going to be able to see when you see that trailer with two axles on it, and it's hauling three maybe four cars on it. And you know it's time to sling the scales on it and see what it looks like. You know, but yeah, that's when that changed. But yeah, the tires that's a new one.
Yeah, that's a yeah, brings back memories of another oddball one that I had. I think this was actually when I was over I remember it was when I was in charge of the data queue program for Georgia, or if it was afterwards, and it's a question that had come to headquarters. But uh, officer had stopped a hot shot,
Mm-hmm.
and under Georgia law, and this is one of those little oddball caveat things is, federal law is gross vehicle weight rating, gross vehicle weight, gross combination weight rating, gross combination weight, that. And
Mm-hmm.
Georgia says, well, you know what, we're going to throw registered weight in there. So if
Let's
you
complicate the mix, right?
let's complicate things,
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things that I mean, under federal law and under the supremacy clause is like, a state can make things stricter. They just can't make it more
Yes.
lenient.
Correct.
So not necessarily that I agree with registered weight, but hey, I mean, Georgia's fair. I mean, it's within their right to do it legally. And so anyway, so this officer stops a hotshot,
Right.
looks at the truck, and the truck has a Georgia tag, and it's rated for 26,000 pounds. So it's below the IRP requirements. So they just got just a regular Georgia license plate on it. And he says, well, you know what? I'm going to go by registered weight on this on Georgia law. So he took the registered 26,000 pounds and added it to the 14,000 pounds of GVWR of the trailer and come up with a gross combination weight of 40,000 pounds.
Okay.
And the driver had a Class C driver's license from Georgia, which 26,000 and below, trailer below 10, or well, combination 26, all that stuff. And popped in for not having a Class A CDL. Well, I look at it when it comes to me, and I'm like, what the heck? And so first thing I look at it is, well, 33.5 doesn't say anything about registered weight, but Georgia law does. So I kind of gave my opinion on that one. Is like, you may have a different opinion than I do on this one, but I was like, well, if you're going to cite that, you really need to cite that as a 392.2 violation for improper class driver's license, because it doesn't fit under 383.
No, I would agree with that, because the thing there is it triggers so much more, because it could potentially trigger non-compliance issues with Part 382 for the carrier. Just with that non-CDL violation being there. So no, I would think 392, 392.2 violation would be a appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, well, but the thing that really got it was so come back to me, and was part of my job is if I'm gonna make a determination on something, I always look at it as, no matter what, I got to be able to defend it in court. If I get subpoenaed or something for it. So I go back in Georgia law and I start looking, and all right, so we got registered weight on the power unit, and he added the GVWR of the towed unit. Well, so you have to dig back into Chapter 2 of Title 40 and actually get into the Department of Revenue. Their tag and title people get into that side of state law, and the definition of registered weight covers power unit, towed unit, and any cargo that's transported within that registration year. So technically, by law, that 26,000 plate covers that entire unit on there. So that's still a non-CDL vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, if he had something that was greater than the 26,000, then that may have been another way of looking at it. But no, I think you'd be right there. You have to go back to what if you're basing something on a registration, what does the registration say? It all boils back to applicability and definitions.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing you and I that have preached for years on that is the two things you got to hit. It has to meet the definition, and it has to meet the applicability. If it doesn't meet both of those, if it only meets one of them, you can't put it in the regulations. It's got to meet both of them. So that's one thing I hate to say. I hate to say it, coming from the enforcement side, but I think CDLs and the applicability on that's one place where people do get really confused, or occasionally don't follow the rule of DMSU.
Yeah.
And but then it falls back, like the point you brought up is it falls back on the carrier at that point, because once that violation goes in, well, hey, I mean, you could get to a point, you get what we would consider a red flag driver,
right?
Causing that, and then you get into the whole, well, you're subject to CDL, so that means you're subject to alcohol and drug testing also. So it just brings up a whole laundry list of things. And again, I think that kind of ties back into what we were talking about, vetting your consultants that you work at, because if you get somebody that they spent their career doing roadside inspections, well, yeah, they know the regulations when it comes to vehicles, or they should know the regulations.
Yeah.
But they don't always have an understanding of how this works on the back end, because unless you do safety audits, compliance investigations, things like that, you don't get into the alcohol and drug testing requirements in Part 40 and Part 382.
No, there's a whole lot more that goes beyond the actual roadside inspection itself. You're right, because there's all different sections in the regulations as well that you generally don't cover in A or B, Part A or Part B, learning to do the driver and vehicle inspections.
Yeah, so there's there's a lot that goes in there, and I mean, we could spend. Lord, we could probably spend a full day just talking about CDLs and applicability on that. But that was one thing that just kind of hit me with just watching the news and seeing everything going on right now. And I was like, then I got thinking about some of the questions that's come up over the years. I was like, man, that might be something good to kind of talk about for a little bit.
Yeah, you're always a master at articulating things. You did a phenomenal job.
Well, I was once told by my colonel I had a PhD in bull, so we'll run with that. But
he told a lot of people that.
Yeah, he did. I love my colonel, man. I couldn't. I'll say this, Colonel McDonough, if you ever listen to this, appreciate everything, man. I couldn't ask for a better boss back in the day, so it was good times.
Definitely a good one.
Yeah, and but I think that kind of ties into something else I wanted to talk about also. The training and compliance investigations and stuff is the high liability areas that get covered, and that's kind of something I was thinking about the other day. I was like, this is probably something we could look at doing a multi-part series on of what are these high liability areas. Well, driver qualifications. I mean, I was a instructor for the compliance investigation class, and I mean we'd spend day and a half going through driver qualifications, qualification files. And I don't know about you, but I'd say that's probably where 40 to 50% of my violations during compliance investigations came from.
Quite a few. I mean, because there is a lot of dotting the I's and crossing the T's in there that has to be done. But when you talk about the file versus the actual qualifications, because there's a huge difference between 391.11 and 391.51. What is a qualified driver versus what's required to be in the file?
Right. Yeah. So that then drug. We mentioned a little bit on drug alcohol testing because I see that's a big issue, and I would say that's probably a lot of my violations came from incomplete driver qualification files, but I'd say probably 80 to 90% of my actual enforcement cases came from violations of the drug and alcohol testing. So I think some of the biggest issues I see on that is and we'll talk about this in another episode, but I think pre-employment's pretty straightforward, random's pretty straightforward, but reasonable suspicion and post-accident, that's two areas I think that are usually if you're gonna find something wrong, it's gonna be in one of those two areas.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, you could do a whole series on that. Post-accident, it's not really that bad. I mean, either you got a hearse, a nurse, or a hood. So you just, and then it depends on if they get a ticket or not. So it's not that difficult.
But it seems like all the violations I've seen in some of the companies I've worked with and stuff is there's, I usually tell a company if I'm working with them, if you have a crash, call me immediately and let's work through this, because like you say, it's pretty straightforward, but it can get complicated pretty quick. Driver gets detained at the scene by a trooper. Driver has to go to the hospital. They're in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. What do you do as a company at that point? So that and the other area I was see a lot on is preventative maintenance and annual inspections. And I remember probably around that same 2011 time frame, around there, I remember we started getting guidance out from DC, from the FMCSA, of doing compliance investigations and actually going in and doing more in-depth interviews with the mechanics who are signing off on annual inspections to determine if they're actually qualified or not.
Oh yeah.
And because the issue is the regulations say, well, you got to know how to inspect the truck, but then you have to be familiar with Appendix A to Part 396, what used to be Appendix G. And you ask people about, are you familiar with the appendix? And they're like, yeah, it's a little thing there in the bottom of your abdomen that ruptures a lot that you have to get taken out. And it's like, nah, not that one, buddy.
Yeah, there's a different one.
Yeah. So so I think also I was thinking on next few episodes, maybe do some covering some of those areas there, because like I say, from a from a company standpoint, owner operator standpoint, or even from a driver standpoint, stuff that you need to know, because even though it's a driver, or excuse me, a carrier responsibility per se, the something comes down the pipeline from a crash or something like that, as a driver, you're going to be named. I hate to tell you, but you're going to be named in the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So, and once you get behind that wheel and you accept that load to go down the road, you're 100% responsible for it. So, it kind of falls on you to make sure that everything is good to go in 10-8 before you leave.
Yep. Without a doubt, those are some good topics. Look forward to discussing them with you in the future.
Yeah. So, well, I think that pretty much wraps us up for this episode. So, appreciate everybody turning in. So, as always, if you found today's episode good, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. If you've got any suggestions about topics or anything like that, shoot us an email. Email is podcast@southeastconsulting.net. And we'll say, till next time, stay informed, stay safe, and we'll see you on the road.
Till next time. See you, dude.